Hey guys, Palsteron here, and let's talk about Endgame for Lightning Strike. First up, there are loadouts. Up here, you can swap between them. Whenever you go, for example, from early game to mid game or end game, what happens is everything swaps. The config swaps, the tree swaps, the skill swap, everything swaps. I think I arranged it correctly. I don't know. This has been introduced this league, so if it's not perfect, then, I mean, yeah, whatever. I'll get there. So for endgame, what I did this time is I went a lot harder because some of the feedback I've gotten from especially last league with the Archmage build is people wanted to go further. So this time we're going to do an experiment, and mid-game is pretty like achievable by basically everybody in the first week. Endgame, I put very endgame, meaning stuff that you can aspire to, and it is very unlikely that you're going to outpace this. If you get to this level here, then at that point you don't need me anymore. You can improve from PoE Ninja. I don't know if I'm going to take this build further than what I'm going to show you, or I'm even going to get there because I usually reroll pretty early. But honestly, with Lightning Strike, I can see it go longer. Just depends on how fun Warden is and how fun the Tinctures is. So let's talk about it. So you might have missed the Tincture quality right here, which actually gives you more Tincture effect, which is quite insane. You can get up to 30% of that if you maybe corrupt it. Although I don't know how that's going to work and how hard the bases are to get. This version is going to be Tincture version. If Tinctures turn out like shit, then sure. But the only way I can see Tinctures actually being shit is if the mana burn works different than we think it works. Because there is a huge load of payoff. And there were some Reddit threads about this as well. And at first, I thought I wouldn't be able to fit it in to the build, but just the fact that you get Flask Sustain from Nature's Concoction with gain 2 charges whenever you hit an enemy with a melee weapon every second, being able to sustain flasks like Progenesis is just absolutely ridiculous. And if you're wondering why I have a life flask, I also have this right here. Tinctures apply to you have 15% increased effect if you've used a life flask recently. So that is very worth it. But obviously just having a life flask, I really like having it while looting. You don't have to, but in general, it's just very comfy against dots. In general, though, the amount of attack and cast speed, just to give you a little bit of a hint, just how much of my damage these are after investing into them, it is ridiculous. It's really hard to see before you actually scale all of the effect on top. And a big thing is they give increased damage, so there's a lot of other stuff you can ignore, and you're still not increased damage starved. Same goes for stuff like attack speed and pen, which might be hard to get. This attack speed, which by the way, just I just changed it in the thingy. Not that you think it's actually local, it isn't, it is global. But just this alone is probably going to have a higher tier of like 25 or something, because this was the level 18 tincture, I think. So in general, it's only going to go up from here, and these tinctures just seem ridiculous. In terms of what I did on the passive tree to kind of accommodate that is I actually cut Oath of Spring. And the reason is that at this point, I actually think the 39 shock might be outdated. Let's just see real quickly. Lightning Strike, shock effect. Yeah, I'm actually over 50% at this point. Let's put like 45 or something to be safe. If you already get that much shock and that much hit damage, at some point, it's just not worth stacking this anymore. So in endgame, we're actually not going to go Oath of Spring, and I think that is the right choice. As well as that, you have to remember that Oath of Spring is additive with one of the best amulets for this build, which is Yoke of Suffering. And Yoke of Suffering also reduces your duration of ailments, which would make it way harder to keep those stacks up. Otherwise, that is not even really a downside whatsoever, because when it comes to freeze, you still have Hoarfrost like stacking up. So that 30% is absolutely nothing to your freeze. Other than that, I also kept Avatar of the Wilds, although maybe you can go Scourge. The reason I did not go Scourge is because you get so much pen already, most likely from the Tincture, unless there's something better. And you would also lose Ellie Mastery, which is very efficient. And on top of that, there's also Alva Gloves right here, which give you fire damage to ignited enemies, which is, yeah, you would lose because you lose the ignite. But okay, let's go for the GG gear. If projectiles return to you does not work on Claw, you're probably going to go for the local elemental damage. I think that one was on Claw. I can't remember 100%. That is by the by. There's going to be something broken that's going to be on there, whether it's Far Shot, whatever it's going to be, something is going to be on Claw. If it's on the power level of everything else, it's going to be ridiculous. Projectile return to you is the biggest one, though, because that would mean you don't have to use returning projectile support. Try LE damage. You're probably going to have a tier 1 fracture. You're going to spam deafenings until you hit a tier 1 cold. And then in suffixes, you are going to reforge speed into either Veiled Orb and get a 3rd suffix, or you're actually just going to craft like here. I actually didn't even put Drip Multi on. Next up, we have Dawnbreaker, which is surprisingly still one of the best choices. It has a crazy high block chance. It has 20% Fizz taken as fire. Can even Scorch in close range, which I didn't take, obviously, but it is there. This shield, I think, can be beaten by something like this, actually, with life, physical damage reduction, a lot of armor, and you can also get some reservation on there, or maybe some fancy max res. Do remember, though, that you cannot get the Fizz taken as corruption anymore. That's why I didn't put it on there. There's definitely a chance that the reduced damage from crit strikes is actually worth going for. Then our helmet, as much reduced mana cost of attacks. This is the final step right here. And then the Fizz damage taken as fire is still on helmet. This will basically be a no-brainer on most builds, or a lot of builds anyways, because it's one of the fewer sources that are left. You want suppress from your helmet. I'm pretty sure I'm on exactly 100%. Do not forget that, for example, if you get some excess dexterity, you can also tattoo more. As you can see right here, I tattooed quite a bit. I did also tattoo 1 chance to blind on hit here, but that's by the by. Other than that, just life and a ton of evasion. Now, you might be wondering why I'm scaling a little bit of evasion here and then armor there. There's no real like reason to this chaos. It's mostly that at 50k is roundabout what I want from my Molten Shell, which is right here. So while I have Molten Shell up, my defenses are basically doubled. It's pretty damn crazy. I even have more duration here. I know this sounds kind of nonsensical because you usually don't need it. It's usually nice to have while you're evading and stuff, to keep it up for longer. I also like this because if you're perma-freezing stuff and you just got procced, everything freezes, and then they come back, your Molten Shell runs out, it's just kind of awkward. That's basically that. Then we have a ton of aura effect here, increased effect of non-curse auras, determination effect right here. You could make a trade-off and get +2 max res if you wanted instead of the curse effect. A ton of spell suppress, phase damage reduction. Now, with recombinators, you could actually get, for example, an only armor base or an only evasion. Probably only armor base would be the choice. And recombinate spell suppression on an armor base. That is possible. But yeah, I just went with a pretty straightforward approach right here. You don't want any life because we are using the life mastery, which gives us 15% max life. Quickie correction, I forgot to put the fortify here. So you wouldn't want to get tier 6 determination effect and tier 3 effect of non-curse auras. You would want to get tier 3 fortify and then tier 6 effect for your auras. Then we have the gloves, which could be a pipe dream, right? I had these in synthesis, I think day 3 or day 4 or something. This was one of the first things I made. If you guys don't know, you can actually recombine these Alva mods together, and this is one of the reasons why I don't like Scorch as well. Like I said, I mean, these gloves are just ridiculous. If you're thinking about using unique gloves like Soul Ascension or the Fortified gloves, just understand what you're losing out on, first up, and also understand that you lose +2 strikes, which is absolutely crazy. Because on this build, I am personally using Nature's Concoction, but for mapping, there is a good chance I'm going to swap to Sion's Ambition, which is just ridiculous. Now, the Projectiles Pierce is a little bit harder to get because you have to balance the Eldritch Implicits on 5/5, but if you can't get it, you lose 1 Pierce. I did not respec this. I saw a lot of people do this once they get 2 Pierce. I would highly recommend, especially if you're farming Affliction or Simus or Delirium, to have more than just 2 Pierces. So I left these 3 Pierces in, but whatever floats your boat. In terms of boots, now here is where it gets a little bit interesting. At first, I was actually going to run Relic Caches and stack a little bit of endurance charges, but I was like, no, that is not efficient enough. It's efficient if you go for Slayer, but on this one, I just wanted to get the ailment immunity out of the way, which meant I could actually replace my Soul of the Brine King with a real Pantheon, which is pretty cool. But yeah, in general, you get up to 32% ailment avoid from here. You get 20% from this cluster, and then the rest is from Ancestral Vision for a total of 100%. So that's why I go for rare boots. Also gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of resistances. Gives you action speed, movement speed, all whatever you want. You can definitely play around with not going for movement speed if you don't want to, because we're Whirling Blades. It's still kind of comfy, especially in town and stuff. Then Yoke of Suffering. I mean, it's one of the craziest amulets in the game. In case you don't know, this is not just for elemental ailments. It also works on poison and bleed. So there is one int node right here that you can transform for a 5% chance to poison on hit. With the amount of projectiles we have, 9 projectiles that return, and you have 2 hits, right? So we're talking like 30 to 40 projectiles a second. You're going to have this up in no time. As well as that, this new cluster right here already positions us well because it gives us chance to bleed. So basically all is up. Then we have amethyst rings. This could be any synth ring you want. I'm not actually sure. Right now, I think the resistance opens up a lot. You could, for example, craft these with crit multi if you really wanted to. Although if you use scorns, it's going to be really, really hard to get your prefixes. So I maybe wouldn't recommend that. But if you have any sort of crazy synth ideas in endgame, definitely go for it. You could also go for vermilions if you really wanted to, but you're probably not going to get a good fracture on. So yeah, it is what it is. Ally damage with attacks minus mana cost is, I think, going to be super premium in endgame, which is also why I'm not going for tamings. And also, I don't think tamings ever has a chance against a good version of this ring. Now, if you were to run no tinctures and you wouldn't have all this increased damage, maybe then taming would come back into the building, right? Then I have Darkness Enthroned. This one's a little bit of an interesting one. I had Perseverance here with a little bit of evasion for a while, but I think in endgame you just get absolutely outscaled by Darkness Enthroned. This could also be, probably not Mage Blood, but this could be Microdistillery Belt. It could also be a Headhunter, whatever you want. But the amount of extra stats this gives you is crazy. Big tip here, if you're hunting for big DPS, I know what kind of jewels you're looking for. You're looking for full flat damage. Attack speed is actually super premium. It's not just even more damage than flat damage. It also makes it just feel so much better. All res is super, super, super premium point for point on Murderous Eye Jewel, so if you can get your hands on that. And life is just like, depending on how squishy you want it to be. I wanted to have at least something to show for because I want to do harder content. So yeah, that is absolutely huge. You can also corrupt these if you get lucky. You can buy synthesized ones, whatever. Also remember that synth jewels are probably gonna be easier to come by now because not as many people are gonna be going for adorned jewels. So those bases with like crit multi might just be lying around. And then we have the Granite Flask, which is just pretty much self-explanatory. We have a Progenesis, which is incredible. If you don't have money for a Progenesis and you're kind of working towards this, I would probably just go for a Jade Flask. You can easily get to like, I don't know, 80% evasion if you really want to, which is especially helpful if you don't have the max hit to actually tank anything. And then the Life Flask is just something I really like. It gives you CB. It gives you something to recover because we're not Slayer and we don't have Overleech. In terms of our tinctures and how they affect our flasks, you want to put them between the flasks because of this node right here, which gives adjacent flasks 2 charges when you hit an enemy up to once per second. So you're going to have massive, massive flask sustains. Do note, though, that you don't have to put Progenesis in the middle because this does not stack twice, just because there's 2 next to it. Mark did already answer this, in case you were wondering. And then as well as that, we have another mastery right here that gives you flasks adjacent to tinctures have 10% increased effect. Now, this one, I don't know if it actually stacks because it might, but probably not. But even then, 10% flask effect for 1 point is a great investment on any build. As for what you want on your tinctures, your guess is as good as mine. This is all we have for now. I would be very surprised if there's something better than 100% increased effect for the implicit. I'm almost certain that the suffixes are going to be actually way better than what we saw so far. But yeah, the 100% damage, don't forget that you have a lot of effect. You get more effect from the quality. You get a ton of effect from the passive tree. You also get effect from the implicit right here, which there might even be better versions of that. But the reason I'm saying that is you want scalable values. So you don't want stuff like Culling Strike that's just like flat. You want stuff that goes from 100 to 200 or even higher. You don't want just Cull, which doesn't have any scaling. Now then we have Jewels. The Ancestral Vision is important because you want to be ailment immune at this point. Thread of Hope, a massive Thread of Hope. This is a good way to actually get Corrupted Blood immune. In fact, maybe I'm going to just add it for the funsies. Massive Thread of Hopes are a lot easier to get now because they are now more targeted to farm. This massive Thread of Hope here, we're going to talk about in a second on the passive tree. Lethal Pride. Important to know about Lethal Pride is I did not include any rage stuff. I know there's a lot of POBs flying around right now with 1 rage on hit that have like 30% more attack damage. I just want you to understand is, first off, only from the melee hit. Your clear usually will look like this. Your projectiles are flying out. Everything is perma-frozen and they die. With Fortified kind of works because you don't have to apply it that much. But rage you have to constantly get going. And after 1 second it falls off. You don't have any rage support whatsoever. Plus, if you hover over, Rage on hit has a cooldown of 0.5 seconds. So good luck standing there and ramping up for 15 seconds. Even with 2, that would be 7.5 seconds of standing in place. And if you just like as much as Twitch, everything's going down. But okay, I think that's a good transition into the passive tree. It's a pretty straightforward tree. Everybody knows this one with like the massive Thread of Hope plus the Lethal Pride. Bow players have been doing it forever. A lot of melee builds, Claw, Dagger have been doing it forever. I guess another addition here is the Light of Meaning, which is the Piranha spec from last league. I'm going for percentage increase armor. This one is actually kind of huge. It gives me, as you can see right here, like 18,000 armor. Also, these two here overlap, which is pretty cool. So they also give you a little bit of extra. I've seen some POBs that go for Lethal Pride up here, because Lethal Pride does turn the Wind Dancer into a different keystone, so you can't take it. Some people have been going Lethal Pride up top and then go Light of Meaning on the bottom, so they can basically take Wind Dancer. Personally, I don't think it's necessary because at this point, we don't have as much evasion chance anymore. This is something you can think about if you are running Grace and you have like 80, 90% evade. Maybe you even go for Watcher's Eye. As for Lethal Pride, once again, I don't buy the whole Rage on melee hit with no... Like, you would need something like this. You would need Inherent Rage Loss starts a little bit later. Otherwise, it's going to feel like... I just think it's going to feel so bad. And you're just going to have situations where only your projectiles are going to clear. I don't think you should invest into those. They're going to be very expensive because almost every POB has it. But that's just my opinion. Maybe I'm going to budge on that as well once we actually play it. Other than that, this just has a little bit of armor, life. I think I have 2 double damage, I want to say, which are somewhere. Yeah, this one has 2 double damage. Don't think too much about this number. This is just the first one I picked. Whatever Lethal Pride is going to be good, it's going to be good. You can also fix your resistances with Fire Res. There's nothing super definitive here anymore. Double damage is obviously GG. Everything else, ever since Fizz taken as has been removed, is not that big of a deal. When it comes to what I picked with this massive thread here, is the usual Blood Siphon Will of Blades is actually worth it. It's also in the armor, so it also gives you 7% armor. Sleight of Hand, just very efficient. Aspect of the Links, Weapon Artistry. So you always take Force of Nature, but these are question marks. If your Lethal Pride doesn't have anything for them, you can also leave them out. Quick Step, you probably always take. Then I obviously take Finesse. And these are just no-brainers, right? Like Harrier, Hired Killer. Also, don't forget that you can get a little bit of extra reservation here. It's especially important if you don't have an Enlightened 4, but you have an Enlightened 3. Other than that, yeah, since we're not going Scorch, we still have the LE Mastery. The Bleed Wheel is still here. The Pierce is still here. You can try this out. Maybe you're going to be happy without it. I guess I still have the Mark Mastery. If you're just clearing, just remove this, I guess. Or, like, I don't know what you want to do with it. Maybe take Frenzy Charge or something in here. Simply because you're not going to need the Frenzy Charge. Or maybe just remove the Mastery, right? And keep the rest. This is still good, right? 40% increased elusive. Now, I know that the crit multi right here is not as good as the Call. You can also go for Call. I'm probably going to fit something in that will replace it. Also, the multi is only worse than the Call right now because we have pretty good multi, right? Like we're at like 500%, which is where you want to be at. But if it's at 400, all of a sudden the multi wins out. This is something you can decide yourself. There's also other sources of Call. And then I guess the mana here, I don't think you're ever replacing this. Just my honest opinion, I don't think you are. Not with the current mana costs. I mean, if you're left side, you get the pleasure of playing with Blood Magic. Oh my god, how absolutely crazy how comfy that's going to be. But in general, yeah, I don't think there's anything more to say about it. Once again, Endgame up here, you can change the whole setup. Then we have our skill gem setup. As always, I put 1 Vaal Lightning Strike into full DPS right here. It's just the same setup. I know you can separate projectiles and melees, but we are not Lightning Strike of Arcing. So the difference is almost not there. The only difference, I think, the only node that doesn't double dip on both is, I think, the starting node. So yeah, sure, you can do it, but I think it would be more confusing than anything else. In terms of supports, the only thing you have to think about is if, right, there's like the local LE mod on Claws, you probably don't need the Awakened LE damage. And if there's no returning proj, then you need returning proj right here. That's basically all the difference. Other than that, Awakened LE damage with attacks. Be careful. I don't think you should be running Reflect maps with this because you will still die to your Whirling Blades, just FY. I would never make that mistake, obviously, but other people, right? I didn't put in Awakened Multi-Strike. Now, I know I have a Progenesis in and stuff, but I cannot imagine how expensive this is going to be on softcore. So I would like to press it. You know it's there, okay? Don't laugh at me. I know I have a 2120 multi-striking here. I get it, but like I don't even want to know how expensive it's gonna be. I seriously don't want to know. Then we have D-term RAF. RAF can be exchanged for whatever you want. I also have a haste setup right here. Now, at this damage right here, you can either skip a lot of damage and get somehow tankier, or you can just remove certain things that are annoying to press, right? So you can remove this if you really want to. I guess I put a Herald of Ice in just for the fun factor. Also replaceable. Now, one thing I want to talk about is Flesh and Stone. Now, there has been in Q&A recently, and there's a reason why I'm not running it. So there are 2 Q&As regarding Flesh and Stone. If you guys don't know, the new Flesh and Stone gives you up to 20% damage reduction to nearby enemies, which sounds really good in theory. However, first up, aura effect doesn't scale. And I'm not surprised by that. That's not what I'm saying here, but just so you know, it doesn't scale, otherwise it would be broken. Now, the way Flesh and Stone actually scales with distance is enemies within a 1.5 meter radius, which is basically point blank on top of them, maybe a little bit away, there you get the full damage reduction. But it goes out, and at the edge, it goes to 0. So you get 0 damage reduction. And if you're wondering how far the edge is in a build that doesn't really have any AoE scaling, I can show you right now. I think I put in Flesh and Stone. Okay, I found it. So it's 2.9 meters. That's how big your aura is. This is how tiny your damage reduction is. If anything hits you anywhere, you just reserve 25 mana for nothing. But it gets even better. So Lightning Strike wants to be a little bit away from the enemy, because otherwise you don't double hit. Now, on Lightning Strike of Arcing, it's different, but that is even more of a ranged playstyle. It's not like you're standing on top of the boss really all that much. And even if you are, like, look at this. 2.9 meters. If your enemy is here and he hits you, you still take full damage. So in general, so this is 1.5 meter right here in the middle, and this is 2.9. This is like sort of like the range you're working in. But do whatever you must. You can definitely throw that in instead of Herald of Ice if it makes you feel better. If your POB looks better, totally fine. Then we have Molten Shell with cost 1 damage taken. Pretty straightforward. We have Assassin's Mark with Mark on hit. You all know the drill. When it comes to clarity, you'll have to play around with this a little bit. I did that to counteract the mana burn. We think we know how it works, but we could also be wrong because it seems kind of broken. It seems like you don't really need much sustain at all if you have 2 tinctures. So you'll have to play around with it. Chances are you don't need it at all and you have an open gem slot, but it's here to kind of remind you. Then Blood Rage, obviously, and then Whirling Blades. One thing I see a lot of people not doing is not have life tap under Whirling Blades. Maybe you don't need it, but I don't want to be in a situation where I can't leech and then all of a sudden I'm on 0 mana. But do as you must. But yeah, that is about it. If you are looking at the POB in the description, it's once again just going to be this, because otherwise people are going to go into the POB and ask me why my League Starter has a Progenesis. So you know it's up here. These are the items you want to aspire for. That's about it. However, huge caveat, there is almost 0 chance that my endgame guide would look like this because I don't have any info on the new mechanics. I'm almost certain there's going to be some giga broken stuff that I don't know about yet, and we're going to build around that. So everything is up in the air, but this gives you a little bit of an idea what to look for at least. But yeah, that's about it. I will put out one more video about mistakes to avoid, and then it's already leak start. I don't know when this is coming out. I've been just absolutely, I don't know. I've had no time, had some IRL stuff to do as well, so I really hope I get to it. But yeah, if you guys want to check me out, I'm going to be on stream over on twitch.tv/Palsteron, so you can league start with me if you want to. We'll be rocking this build. If Warden sucks, we're going to experience that together. That's all I can promise. So with that said, since I still don't have a slogan, see you next time.